mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 3, Episode 8 of HBO's Succession, entitled Chiantishire. I did a little bit of research on the title, so I'm just going to read this like 2-sentence blurb that kind of describes what Chiantishire is. Chiantishire is a nickname for a part of scenic Tuscany in Italy, popular with posh Britons. Chianti is a local wine, and Shire is a common name for an English country. So that's where the title comes from, and that's also where Caroline, most of the Shiv children, most of the Roy children's mother is having her wedding at. I believe she's not Connor's mother, but she is Shiv, Kendall, and Roman's mother. I loved this episode. Like, there's so much great stuff that happened in this episode, and you know, I say this every week about how layered this show is, and this episode was a great example of how they kind of just like layer in stuff to where, like, when you look below the surface, there's still extra cool, interesting shit happening. Like, you get some great scenes here. You get characters that seem to be about to reach their breaking point. And then, like I said, with the layers, you get some interesting, what I consider to be kind of callbacks to previous really interesting moments from the series as well. So I'm going to go over some of the scenes that I thought were the best ones. And then I'm just going to give like thoughts at the end, kind of like, just, you know, since I can't talk about everything in depth and there is a lot to talk about from this episode, I'm just going to talk about the important shit. And then, like, at the end, just run off a couple of thoughts on things that I liked, a couple questions that I had on the things that I just don't have time for, because I want to talk about all these great scenes. So the first great scene I want to talk about, I think, is pretty obvious. It's the dinner scene between Kendall and Logan. And one thing I love about this show is that it's similar to Gomorrah, which I also review on this channel, in that they don't really drag things out here. Like, you know, Logan is approached by Kendall at this garden party, and Kendall's is like, you know, like let's just meet and have dinner and squash this shit. And my immediate thought was, please let that happen in this episode and not something that doesn't happen for a while. And it happens not even like at the end of the episode. It happens like midway through the episode. And I'm glad they didn't drag that out. But this dinner conversation is incredible because, again, it's very layered. What I want to start with is kind of like the main layer that I found the most interesting here. To talk about this, I kind of got to rewind a little bit back to earlier in the episode. Shiv and Roman expressed concern to their mother about marrying this guy, Peter. And, you know, they both asked, do you have a prenup? And they're concerned. And Shiv and her mother have an interesting conversation about motherhood and how, you know, she was fairly absent. Shiv says, you know, I didn't care, but you weren't really around. And then she goes, I should have never had kids. Some people just aren't fit to be mothers. And she says, I'm like, you made the right choice. Essentially kind of like aligning herself idealistically with Shiv, who, of course, even though Shiv is saying you weren't around and I don't care, she probably doesn't want to feel like she's the same as her mother. So for her to say that was an interesting thing to say that we're going to end up back with again later in the episode. But the thing that really jumped out to me on second viewing, and that's why I always watch, this is the only show that I review or have ever reviewed on this channel that I consistently watch every episode twice, because there's always something you're going to catch the second time that you didn't catch the first time. And in this case, this line that Caroline delivers comes up later in the episode. And you might not think about that until you've watched the episode a second time. Because when she said it, when I was watching the second time, I was like, oh shit, like, I kind of get where this is going. So she says that she wouldn't have been a good mother, and she said she should have just had dogs. And Shiv said, you could have had dogs. And she said, well, not with your father. And then she says, he never saw anything he loved that he didn't want to kick it to see if it had still come back. And at the time, I thought that was a great line about Logan, because he certainly does seem like that kind of guy. But then when I'm watching the second time, I'm like, that's exactly what he's doing with Kendall. He offered Kendall the out, like, you know, hey, take this payout. Last week, he offered Kendall the out. And now Kendall comes back broken, defeated. You saying you won, you're evil, I just want out. You don't have anything to do with me. I don't have anything to do with you. Buy me out and we're done. Fuck it. I give up. You win. It's a complete and total slam dunk win for Logan. And Logan essentially tells him to fuck off because he wants to kick him and see if he'll keep coming back. And I don't think Kendall will this time. But that the fact that he just did not have any interest in actually taking this deal shows just how evil and demented Logan is. Like, he's already won and he still will not actually take the win. He wants to drag it out and continue to just beat on Kendall. And he's incredibly vindictive, incredibly mean, incredibly evil and powerful. And that really comes into play in this scene. And then the other aspect of this scene that was great was the whole situation of Logan essentially not wanting food that the chef made. And Kendall implies, he says, you think I'm going to Jim Jones you with an olive, aka, if you're not familiar with Jim Jones, but he was like the head of a cult and they all killed themselves. And he, implies that you're like, yo, you think I'm going to poison you with the food or something like that. And then when the waiter comes out with like what I'm assuming is like the appetizers, Kendall goes, that one's for him. And that was a funny line for me because I'm looking like he's just fucking with him. Like, oh, you're acting like I'm going to poison you. Well, I'm just going to fuck with you now and say like, oh, that plate's for him, as if like, make sure you don't give me the one with the poison. And and again, these are very subtle things that's happening here. And it's just the writing on this show is fucking incredible. And then Logan calls out his grandson and makes him eat the food. And like, that is so incredibly cold-blooded. Like, because Logan probably knows it's not poisoned and that Kendall's just fucking with him. But that shows Kendall that he's so hardcore that he will make you, if he thinks you might be poisoning him, he's willing to make your kid eat it on his behalf. And that is just fucking ruthless, man. And the look on Kendall's face, like, I was just fucking with you and you're here essentially saying that you're willing to put my kid's life on the line just to fuck with me. And then that also kind of is like a callback to earlier this season, the whole thing with the donuts. I think it was like episode 2 or something like that, where Logan sends the donuts to everybody while they're deliberating and they have a conversation like, would dad poison the donuts? Like, I don't think so, but I can't rule it out. And it just made me think about that scene and how now we've had 2 instances of like potentially poisoned food involving Logan, where you can't, at least in that scene, we go, I don't think Logan would poison the donuts, but I don't know for sure. But in this scene, it's like, okay, he's kind of saying like, I'm willing to sacrifice your kid to make sure that I don't get poisoned. And like, that was just, what a scene, man. What a scene. And this show continues to do shit like that. Like these really big, dramatic, impactful scenes that are so packed and layered with information and context that has been built up over the course of episodes or seasons or whatever. And it's just so good how they do so much with so little. What a great scene that was. The next thing I want to talk about is toward the end. I spoke last week about, I think it was last week's episode, about how big of a prick Roman is when it comes, how big of a prick Roman is really, those words really hang heavy after this episode. But how big of a prick Roman is when he's in his father's good graces. And then he sends the dick pic to to Logan by mistake that's meant for Jerry. And again, I thought that was great too, because they took something that seemed almost kind of like a throwaway scene for giggles, where Jerry's asking him to not do it anymore. That scene's played for laughs and it feels like a throwaway. And then they bring it up again to like maximum fucking effect, right? So he sends the dick pic to Logan by mistake. And in that conversation where they're off in the other room, you could see Roman literally shrinks in the boardroom in that moment. And then where they're having the conversation later, Roman is like a child. Like he can't even fully respond. It's like, I just did, man. I just said my dick. Like, yeah, whatever. Like he can't even handle having this conversation because he is so intimidated. He like reverts to like a fucking like teenager or something. And it's great work from Kieran Culkin, but he's done so much to show how much Roman relies or is dependent upon the affection of his father, and it really comes through in that scene. And then they do again with the layered character work here. Shiv taking like an opportunity to get revenge on Roman, because Roman's been rubbing it in her face that he's kind of pushed her out of this deal with Madsen. She hasn't had much of a say, kind of constantly just like rubbing her face in this, right? And then now she takes the opportunity for revenge. Like, we all know this is just Roman being Roman. And he says that, Logan says that, is this just Roman being Roman? And she says, no, I think it could be a potential problem. And she makes it into something bigger than it has to be because she sees this as an opportunity to get revenge on Roman. And any other show would have the characters kind of like verbalize that. But this is something that you just pick up on because like if you're watching my videos, I've been talking about Roman going hard on Shiv like this and like really rubbing her face and everything. So when that moment comes, that opening, she takes it. And it's so good that, we were able to have something that was a very loaded moment. Like that's something, it seems on the surface very simple. Like, yeah, like, no, I think this could be a problem. But it's that context, that layered character development where it's not a big deal because we know that Roman's just fucking around and Shiv knows that Roman's just fucking around, but this is her payback. And she even comes out and says something like, I put in a good word for you, which she literally did the opposite of. So that was a really, really great scene as well. The next thing I want to talk about was Shiv and Time. I've been talking about all season, saying that these two are headed for a blow up. And it continues to build. And we've only got one episode left, so I feel like it's got to happen next week. But, they have a situation where they're trying to do a little dirty talk. And Shiv's idea of dirty talk is, I'm too good for you and I don't love you. And what is wrong with her? Like, she is so unbelievably cruel to this man. And it's not outwardly cruel, like, you piece of shit, yada, yada, yada. But we know, again, from the characterization, we know how sensitive Tom is about their relationship. We know how little she cares about his well-being. I've been saying all season about her not giving a fuck about him going to prison. We know how much she cares about being in charge of this company way more than anything else. And for her to just come at him like that. And then later when he brings it back up, like, I kind of felt the way about you saying you didn't love me. She tries to flip it on him and say that he's being manipulative because he asked for dirty talk. And then she says that and now he's making a big deal out of it. Like, what a cruel, cruel person she is. And she's not outwardly cruel, but it's because of we know what she's doing. We know how she really feels. We know how Tom really feels. And she's doing nothing to alleviate any of his nervousness or apprehension. And it's just a terrible thing that Shiv is doing to him. And I mean, sometimes you want to feel bad for Tom because that's the only time that he shows that vulnerability. Like, she shits on him and treats him like shit, knowing how he feels about her. And then he manifests that in the way he treats Greg. Like, he lets that out on Greg instead of on Shiv. And I really believe that next week he's going to let that out on Shiv, and it's going to be really fucking epic. And then she also decides that she wants to have a baby, not because she wants to have a baby with him, but because her mom essentially made the comparison that she shouldn't have a baby. Like, yeah, some of us just aren't fit to be mothers. You made the right choice. And she decides she wants to have a baby, but then she makes it so as unromantic as you could possibly make it. She's over here talking about freezing eggs and 10 years down the road. Like, she's not doing anything romantic whatsoever. And she's clearly put a lot of thought into this egg freezing thing. And Tom even remarks that, like, yeah, I don't think I'd have put this much thought into this at this point. So, like, the idea of not doing this the traditional way, like, yeah, I want to have a baby, but not like, the way people normally have babies. We'll just freeze eggs and then see what happens 10 years down the road. Like, having that conversation directly on the heels of the I felt a way about you saying you didn't love me last night conversation just made this a really heartbreaking episode for Tom. Again, kind of hard to feel bad for Tom sometimes because of the way he treats Greg, but man, that was some brutal stuff there. We're flying along pretty good here. So the next scene that I wanted to talk about was Mattson sends out a tweet that essentially makes it look like he's exploring other options, and everybody panics. So they send Roman to go talk with him, and essentially it sounds like he wants an equal partnership and not just an acquisition. And that could change the entire power dynamic at Waystar. I think Frank or Carl, one of them, even said via that Zoom call that like their own personal inheritance or something like that would be diluted. The idea that Logan and the Roys would no longer be completely in charge, but Roman kind of sells the idea by saying like, I'm sure Mattson just wants it kind of like like publicly, they're kind of even, but like we'll still run everything, I'm sure. And I wonder if that's gonna backfire as well. Like they're gonna agree to this, and it's not gonna be a thing where it's as simple as Mattson just kind of like wanting to be equal on paper. Like he's gonna want to actually, like he's gonna be like downvoting certain things Logan wants to do, and like I could see this being a potential season 4 story arc where Mattson is involved in a way that is not what Roman promised and not what Logan's gonna want to see. Let's see. Oh, and then the last thing, the closing scene. I feel like, are we meant to believe that Kendall might be dead? I look at that as such an impossibility that scene didn't even really hit for me, because I feel like there's no way Kendall's dead. Like there's just not. Like, do you have this show without Kendall? Like we already know there's a 4th season that's been it's been renewed for a 4th season. What do you do? Like, do you have as good of a show without Kendall? I don't think you do. Like you're taking essentially one of your best pieces off the board, and I don't know. I looked at that as such an impossibility that scene didn't even hit for me. So if something actually does seriously happen to Kendall, it's probably going to throw me for a loop next week, because I just looked at it as like, yeah, he fell asleep and he's probably going to wake up and he'll be fine. Worst case scenario, somebody will see him, he'll get taken to the hospital and he'll be okay. But the idea that Kendall might be dead, I'm not buying that. But let me know in the comments if you think that might be the case. I just don't think you take your Emmy winner and write him off the show. So again, great episode. But I'm going to wrap up with some of the thoughts that I had that I can't really flesh out too much because I want to spend time talking about those great scenes. The whole thing with Greg Comfrey, this Contessa, and this whole thing, how Tom and now Shiv as well is getting on him about punching above his weight. I wonder how this is going to play out, because Greg seems to really be on the brink, just like Tom, of being fed up with that shit. Like, he came back at Tom before saying like, well, Shiv's too good for you, which Shiv says directly to Tom during their dirty talk. And now, they're talking about this dating ladder, and Greg seems focused on like proving that he can score women that are, from their perception, out of his league. But I feel like there's got to be something here that's going to happen that I'm missing. And I'm wondering if it's just that, well, my thought the whole time is that Greg is going to manifest into someone who's going to have a whole lot of power by the end of this thing. And I'm wondering if this is going to be the start of it, like this constant, like, dismissal of him, I think is the best way to put it. This constant dismissal of Greg. It's starting right now as in like, you can't even date this one girl. And if he bags the Contessa or something like that, like it could be the start of the Greg come up. So I think that's an interesting angle right there. Caroline's husband, Peter, what a ridiculous looking guy. Like he looked like a fucking like Miami drug dealer or something. Like, why is he like a fucking like 1950s like bandit? Like they could not have made a more cartoonish looking guy. Like he looks like a villain, and not a villain who'd be like good at being a villain because he's smart, but just somebody who is just like, I don't know, somebody you would even take seriously. Like he's such a big fuck up, and that's why he's trying to marry Caroline, which they directly, reference in the show. But like he just looks like they wanted to make him look like a bad guy, but like a bad guy with some money, or at least a bad guy who wants to look as if he has money, but he doesn't really have the taste for it. Like he just looked cartoonish to me. I thought it was funny. I love the scene where at the beginning when they're talking about they're on this board meeting. Shiv doesn't show up to it because she's still upset, and she says she's gonna call into it. And they have this meeting, and Frank says Shiv's not here. She sends her apology. She's working on strategy, and then he says Kendall's not here due to illness. And then and then my immediate thought is that's funny because we know Kendall's not there. That's not the reason that Kendall's not there. And then it just as my brain formed, that's not the reason that Kendall's not there. Kendall goes, "That's not true. That's not actually true," or something like that. And I was just like, that was just so funny that he was on the phone, and they were saying that he wasn't there due to illness. And then Frank says that they're going to talk about the ongoing DOJ investigation, so they're going to recuse Kendall, and he mutes the phone. And Logan. And they pan over, and Logan's standing just on the other side of the glass wall, staring at them menacingly, which was, again, another callback, I think, to the no confidence vote from season 1. So really, that was really funny to me. Connor asking Willa to marry him, I think, was a funny kind of thing too. I don't know if it's going to become important, but the whole idea of her delaying answering, how the conversation started with her kind of going like, yeah, maybe we could go back to being secret again. Like, that'd be super cool. Like, she totally is not in on this. But then I also wonder too, there's a moment where Comfrey tells Kendall about this podcast or whatever that's going to do some digging into their family. And then we know that Connor wants to run for president and he's asking her to marry him. And that does make me wonder if her past as an escort is going to come into play in ruining maybe something Connor's trying to do, or at least making it so that Waystar has to do some kind of like cover up work or something like that to make Willa look a little bit more suitable for First Lady. Oh yeah, and then also with that podcast, the whole idea of them looking into that caterer that died with Kendall at the beginning of, well, that wasn't the beginning, that was at the end of season 1. I don't even remember when that happened, but I know it was at Shiv and Time's wedding. But yeah, I wonder where that's going to go, if that's going to come up as well, because Kendall doesn't need any more problems, man. I loved when Kendall first arrived at the garden party with his head shaved. His mother goes, "Did you come from the front?" like from the front lines of the war. Like, man, she could throw some shade, can't she? And then I love when Greg's talking to the Contessa, trying to flirt, and he's doing this thing like, "Oh, is that the time?" Like, trying to flex his watch and shit. And then Roman comes out and says something like, "Can you watch the Contessa?" And then he's walking away. He says, like, "Sorry about him." Like, man, he just threw so much cold water on Greg's attempt to flirt with the Contessa. But that's all I got for this episode. I thought this was a really great episode. I'm really excited for the season finale. I think they've set up some really great angles. I think we're going to see some really explosive shit from Tom and Shiv next week. I think we're going to see some explosive shit from everybody. Everybody has a reason to explode at this point. Connor might explode on Willa for not agreeing to marry him, or not agreeing in a timely manner to marry him. Kendall, is he alive? Is he dead? If he is, what's going to happen? Is he out? Is Jerry going to get fired for accepting Roman dick pics? Like, that was another move that Shiv did that I thought was interesting. Kind of playing it like, well, if you don't file a complaint against Roman, it's going to look like you wanted the pics, which undermines your position. Like, Shiv is taking Roman out at the knees, and it's pretty impressive. But Tom's probably going to have something for her next week. But I'm going to wrap up now, and I will see you guys next week for the finale. Peace.